Thank you all very much for coming out this evening to a very special screening of Beasts of the Southern Wild, presented by the Philadelphia Film Society and the men's group of Rodette Shalom. We're very, very happy to have all of you here this evening. We're really, really happy to also have Dan Janvey, producer of the film Beasts of the Southern Wild, here with us tonight. And we are very, very excited to hope all enjoy the film. And Dan, would you like to just talk a little bit about your experiences with the film? And we are open up to Q&A.
Sure. I guess I have so many. Does anyone have any questions? Sure. Well, I don't know. What do you think they represent? I'm not. I think that they're the aurochs. The aurochs, and actually aurochs are a real thing. They are these like prehistoric creatures. I think that he's intentionally set up as many different meanings. And for me personally, they're sort of emblematic of all of these scary, very, very dangerous things that are out to destroy Hush Puppy in the bathtub, that Hush Puppy has to sort of confront in order to do what is probably the hardest thing to do, which is what you're doing at the end of the film. I think it's open to a lot of different interpretations, for sure.
Did you specifically plan the use of nonlinear time? Because in many ways, I'm sure you've seen Daughters of the Dusk, there was a little bit of feeling there. A lot of people, I think, might want to follow something that isn't linear. And this really switched back and forth a lot, and it made it special, which is much more of an African motif.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's really that movie.
Okay, I'll check it out. And I think the film certainly open to many interpretations. I think we set out to make something linear, but maybe one of the things that you're touching on is that the film certainly exists in a very special place, because we're really trying to situate the viewer, situate you in Hush Puppy's point of view on the world. And so one way we did that, the entire film was shot at Hush Puppy height, so she was at this tall, and so the cameraman had a special rig where it didn't follow her around, and I think the camera in particular is trying to get you to see things from her perspective. We shot the film over 53 days between April 20th and July 3rd in 2010. And April 20th is actually the first day of April 20th is the day of the explosion of the oil rig. This is the oil Deepwater Horizon. And so, as we were shooting the film, the region got more and more taken over by the cleanup effort, and it just interacted with the story we were trying to tell in really eerie, very upsetting ways. Because the film is inspired by a lot of different hurricanes and a lot of things happening in southern Louisiana. It's not just Katrina. There have been many other storms since then. Between the hurricanes and coastal erosion, the communities in that part of the country are really at threat. And then when the oil spill happened, it just sort of felt like the end of the world. Yeah. And 53 days is a long shoot for a low-budget film. Yeah.
How old is the actor, and how did you get her to do all the things?
Yeah. Quvenzhané was 5 when we cast her, and I don't have children, but I've met a few, and that's very, 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 very young. And she was 6 when we shot the film, and now she's 8. And you can really tell the difference. She's going to be on Leno tomorrow night, so we should all check that out. That's going to be super fun for us. But we did a statewide audition. We auditioned about 3,500 children for the role, and I would say no one really came close to Quvenzhané. And the performance you see isn't a smoke and mirrors act. Sometimes when you direct children, you have to come up with all these tricks to get them to make it seem like they're acting. And Quvenzhané really had the ability to understand the part, the scene, and basic mechanics of acting, like hitting your mark, hitting eye lines, and so it was pretty miraculous seeing her do that. The whole film sort of rests on her too.
Piggybacking on that, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting with Dwight and getting to interview him as well. Could you talk a little bit about the very, very unique road that he took to get captured in the film?
Yeah, the actor who plays Dwight Henry, he's actually a baker in New Orleans. He owns the buttermilk drop on Quvenzhané Street, and he was familiar. And he used to own a bakery across the street from where we would do casting that we would go to from time to time. And we always really loved him, and we hit it off with him and encouraged him to audition. And we loved what he brought to the role. And he kept, at some point we decided we wanted him to play the part, and he kept turning us down. And so we would have to just show up at his bakery in the middle of the night begging him to do the movie. And I think he was reluctant because his attitude about it, he sort of understood that the passion we had for the film was the same as the passion he had for the bakery. And we had to figure out a really unique way of scheduling the film that he could sort of make sure his bakery was going to be okay. I think he gives a great performance. I'm very proud of him. Yeah, he's great. I wish he was here. He's Mr. Henry and Quvenzhané, and they're a lot more entertaining than I am. But I told them about this, and they were like, "Oh, cool, say hi to them." Sure.
Does the actress that pretty much talking about you acting?
Yeah. Quvenzhané. Oh, sure. The question is about if Quvenzhané wants to continue acting. And I think that she does, if a good opportunity comes up. I know she has a little bit of time. But when she answers that question, like, what are you doing next? She was in fourth grade. I know she's doing fourth grade next. So if we were in Japan, she would say she wanted to be a dentist. And sort of pressed on that, she would say, well, that way I can clean my teeth and have clean teeth for the movies. I don't know if she'll hold on to that dream. And Mr. Henry also would like to continue acting as well, but very similar to Quvenzhané, he has his bakery and that's his life and it's everything to him. And so he will never do anything to jeopardize that. He's going to open up Wink's Bistro and Bakery in New Orleans after his character. He's going to serve hush puppies on the menu. No, seriously, he's going to do that. So, like, Peace in the Southern Wild is going to have its own, like, bubble gum.
Totally scripted, or were there any elements of improvisation?
Well, the question was if the film was scripted or if there were elements of improvisation. I think that it was scripted, absolutely, but the script writing process incorporated a lot of rehearsal and improvisation on the part of the actors. So then the writer-director was never precious about how he would ask them, how would you say this, what would you do in this situation, and then those conversations would lead to major revision. Yeah.
The scene of construction of the house broken down, was that there, or did you create it?
Sure. The question is how we flooded the town or how we destroyed the houses. And it's fairly complex. We would actually we figured out a very clever way of flooding the bathtub, which is that if you notice that the bathtub goes through three phases. There's the pre-storm idyllic bathtub, there's the flooded bathtub, and then there's the end of the world bathtub. And we would recreate sets 3 times in different locations as if the landscape had shifted. So for example, if you go back and see the film, which I encourage everyone to do, if you go back and look at the bar, Lady Joe's bar, you'll see that it's raised 10, 12 feet off the ground. And then when we flood the bathtub, we literally rebuilt the bar, but submerged it underwater. And so we went to a swamp to do that. And then in the end, it was fairly easier because everything was destroyed. So that makes it. So it was really about finding locations that told the story of the destruction of the bathtub and then moving sets to those locations. hope that's clear. Yeah, or it's a magic trick.
So Ben must have been in southern Louisiana to get the inspiration for the story. Why was he there?
Yeah, the question was about Ben being in southern Louisiana for the inspiration of the story and why he was there. Ben moved to New Orleans in 2006 to make a short film, and he got stuck there. He fell in love with it very deeply. And he started exploring in the region outside of New Orleans, specifically the parishes, the coastal parishes of southern Louisiana. And I think he fell in love with a lot of the people there and the communities there, and specifically figured out that he wanted to tell a film about holdouts, about people who refused to leave because of how much they value their homes and their community. And so he fell in love with southern Louisiana too. And the bathtub is it's a very made-up place. It doesn't exist at all. There's no one place or culture that looks like that. So the bathtub is very much a mix of all the different cultures of southern Louisiana. It's New Orleans jazz culture, Cajun culture, Indian culture, and it's completely made up, but influenced from all these real sources. Yeah. Sure, the question about the film's funding. Beast is unusual. It was funded entirely by a nonprofit organization in New York called Cinereach. And one of the advantages of nonprofit funding is the marketplace doesn't have to dictate creative choices. So the most specific thing that usually affects is casting. So you normally go about making an independent film and saying, I want to make a movie about bathtub, and then a financier will say, well, which star do you want to put it in so that I can sell it abroad? And in Cinereach, they sort of set a mandate that said, whatever conventional wisdom says you have to do to make a film, you just throw it out and reinvent the playbook. So when we went to them and said we want to cast a baker in New Orleans, they were like, that's incredible, let's go for it. And that's a tremendously risky decision. So it was true, I like get emotional thinking about that because their level of support for this film is astounding and truly risky. Like wherever we're ending up now is not what we expected when we set out to make the film. And their support never wavered. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm just kind of marveling at the fact that people who weren't professional actors are actually how do you get someone to act like a baker or whatever?
Well, thank you. The questions from us compliment the very convincing performances from non-professionals and how they did that. I think it's a testament to them. Like, I think Mr. Henry has all of these things that he brings to the film, and he really worked very, very hard to become an actor. It's not as if he's not like that at all. He's a father. Yeah, he's a father, so he said he was tapping into that. He had a daughter around that age, and he also has lived through many hurricanes in New Orleans, so he tapped into that. He worked very hard at his acting film. So every night we have people go into the bakery and run lines with him and workshop his skills. And all of those meetings would take place between like 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., which is truly, those are interesting hours. I don't keep those hours.
There's a fair amount of violence directed towards the main character. Has there been any pushback in terms of that on the film? It's very powerful, but it's also very disturbing.
Yeah, the comment about the level of violence towards the main character, I think specifically the level of violence of Wink towards his daughter Hush Puppy. Then separate, there's a lot of scary things happening to Hush Puppy outside of Wink's treatment of her. I think it was very much our intention to portray a very, very complicated yet deeply loving father-daughter relationship. And we felt it was unusual to see those in film that didn't veer towards one extreme. I think a more normal approach would be that this is an abusive person and a monster, or just like a cute, loving dad. We wanted to tell a movie about someone who has a father has a deep, deep love for his daughter, and yet doesn't necessarily know how to express it in natural ways. Doesn't really know how to raise a girl, for example. And so, pushback, I don't know, we'll find out. I don't think enough people see the film yet to know. But we intentionally wanted to create a very complicated relationship. Go in the back. Sure. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'd just like to hear a little more about the creative process for this thing. I thought I noticed at the end that it was somehow based on a play. Did the director do the play? Is that something else? Basically his story?
Sure.
Tell me a little bit more about how it comes together.
Sure.
The story.
So the question is about how it's adapted from the play. The play is really about that father-daughter relationship, and Ben wanted to sort of was exploring the play and wanting to do something with that as he was discovering these towns in southern Louisiana, and he then wanted to sort of see how the two were related to one another. Somehow the story of the death of a parent is related to your community being under threat and possibly disappearing. And Ben and Lucy worked very, very hard on transposing the world of that relationship of Hush Puppy and Wink to the bathtub. Like the play doesn't include the bathtub, so that's the biggest adaptation that it went through. And Lucy's also a co-writer on the film, so they worked very closely on creating this new movie out of her original text.
We have time for two more questions.
Oh, great. We'll take these two right there.
At what point did you and your co-producers and director get together with these things and say, hey, we think we have to do?
Well, I think that the question was at what point did we get involved? And I think there's a second question, at what point did we think we had something? I think we always believed in the material from the beginning, and we always believed in the process we were going to bring into life, which is very community focused. It's that if you go into these places that you're not from, that the way to do it is to actually meet a lot of people and listen to a lot of people. And we got involved at the very beginning at this stage, which was, we really started working on this film in the fall of 2008, and it was fairly intensive throughout that whole thing. Yeah, I don't know when we realized, I think we worked so hard on it, we chose not to think about that. I think that's how we got through it, actually. We would have gone crazy trying to figure out what it is or how successful it's going to be. Sure, last question.
So, this is very gentlemen that were there. When I was in the movie, through everything, the relationships with what we talked about, the whole real transparency, the story, everything. And I was wondering, when Ben were writing it, if that was the theme that they talked about and that was portrayed and talked about.
Yeah, the point was about resilience and how a lot of behavior in the film is emblematic of very resilient people or community, and I think absolutely that was an essential part of the whole process for us. This idea that we wanted to tell a story about remarkably resilient people, and specifically the Hush Puppy character. Our idea very much is that we wanted to create a tiny little hero of cinema. And so this is sort of, to me, the origin story of one of the great heroes of our time. And so we said, let's set out to tell a folk tale about this hero the world hasn't heard of yet, and a very resilient hero. I think just before we wrap up, I want to say that the film is going to open in Philadelphia on July 13th at the Ritz East.
Ritz East, correct.
There are many Ritzes.
There are 3 Ritzes. Right now it's the Moonrise Ritz. That's all that's playing for Ritz East. But it will be taken over by the Southern Wild come July 13th.
Good. So please spread the word. Very, very small film. You can use all the support that it can get. So if you enjoyed the film, please spread the word. And also, I'll say that soundtrack is available on iTunes.
It is fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks very much.
Thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you very much.